Father, thanks for today, for life, for your love for us. Thanks that we are your sons and daughters, adopted into your family. And no matter what's going on with the circumstances in our life, help us, to remember who we are as your children and help us see clearly just what you called us to um, as your children. So I pray that this time would be helpful and encouraging for everybody in their different places, circumstances, different contexts. You know where every person is at, you know where every church is at. So again, I pray that this would be helpful for each leader and for each church just to see some specific next steps they can take to lead their churches well and lead their families well and um, live faithfully for you. So we commit the time to you. Lead our thoughts, lead our questions, lead everything right now. We love you and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, before we move on to a few new things, wanted to make sure, see if you have any questions or observations about the previous things. Don't know if you took any notes from that first session or remember any big ideas from that first session, but yeah, any comments, clarifications? We don't want to move on until everybody's feeling good about the previous. Welcome, Adam. It looks like Mark's coming in from the canal again. Any thoughts or questions? Anything that struck you as
Would you say that last week or last time, we were kind of looking at the basics of what it means to be a church family together without yet at that stage looking beyond that to what it means to be looking outwards to reach the lost?
good? Yep, yep, definitely that emphasis on the starting point and who we are and our identity. I think that's a big one. I'm more convinced of it than ever after all these years of um, working with churches that the identity piece, I mean, you know, the tendency as church leaders and even as humans is to do things. We want to just do things. We've got a to-do list, and our churches have a list of activities and and programs, and so people begin to see the Christian life and begin to see disciple making and just begin to see it all as things to do rather than living out of who they are. Waking up in the morning with this sense of an identity, a God-given identity, which then sends them into their day, wherever they're going, whether it's work or a day off or wherever they're going, but that God sends them with an identity, with who they are as his sons and daughters. Um, and then if that identity, as that identity informs us throughout the day, it should affect our decisions. It should affect our relationships and our conversations and our motivations. See, because a lot of times when we talk about disciple making and mission, we have to be honest. True discipleship is messy. I always tell churches, if you don't feel like your church is a mess and the disciple making around you is a mess, you're probably not making disciples. I think it's built into the definition of discipleship is broken, messy. That's the point, is that we're bringing the gospel and we're bringing healing and redemption to broken people or broken parts of people's lives. Okay. So it's messy on the, in one sense, but then also as we think about mission, it's not easy. We're going to lost, broken people that think differently, that speak differently, that whose lifestyles are, often quite different. So to be motivated to do that consistently, it's like, where's that motivation going to come from? Is the motivation for the people in our church is just, oh, we should do that. We should love that neighbor. We should invite that neighbor. Are we doing it out of, again, some kind of church to-do list or trying to perform or prove something in some way rather than just saying, hey, that's my lost neighbor across the street. I've got a neighbor across my street who's Buddhist, and we have become great friends. And many times, though, I've got five children and there's a lot of life happening around us. Many times I'm tired just being a dad and just living life. I don't feel like going across the street to love that neighbor. I don't feel like having one more conversation with him. I don't feel like it. But often because of my identity, and then I think what something we're going to talk about in a bit is the spirit's prompting. I do go. I see him doing a little project in his front yard, in his front space. And so I don't feel like it, but in light of who I am, and because the Spirit's prompting me to go, I go to love him, to take an interest in his life, to ask him some questions about his family. I go. And so it's in that going that I've built trust with him, that I've become friends with him. We're very different. He's Laotian. Okay. So, very different story. He's Laotian and he's Buddhist, but man, he loves our family. They're constantly, we often, how we talk about blessing others, they actually try to bless us more. They own a restaurant, and so they're always cooking Laotian food or different types of Asian food, always bringing home cooked Asian food across the street to us. Well, why does that happen, or how does that happen? He's not doing it for the rest of the neighborhood because I see him, I watch him. He's not doing that to the rest of the neighborhood. Why is he doing it for us? Why is he doing it for us, for our family? Because our family has loved him well. We've built trust with him. Does that make sense? But you hear a story like that and you go, oh, that sounds good and easy and kind of like textbook. That's how you build a relationship. Well, it's not because we're highly motivated many times. Again, it's because of identity and the spirit's consistent prompting, prompting and leading. So Mick, um, yes, identity. I really want to encourage you to say, how can we do that more, do that better in our churches? Root our people in who they are. So they go about their day, they go to work in light of their identity, they go to school in light of their identity, they live in their neighborhood in light of their identity. And then as part of that identity, Mick, yes, family is a big part of that. And I work with churches all around many different countries, and I'm so sad because I think this is a real lack in a lot of churches. Because I ask them and they tell me, yeah, we like the idea of family, but we don't necessarily function like family. People don't see it as a family that they're committed to. They see it as an organization, or they see it as something other than family. Well, again, practically, you can imagine if you see yourself as committed to an organization, the church, compared to church as family, very different in terms of commitment, right? Like an organization is optional. It's like, yeah, we like those bits, but we don't like those things. So we'll do this, but we won't do this. Well, good families don't function like that, right? Good families, whether you like it or not, they're family, and you're just always in the middle of the family, doing what the family does and working through conflict. Okay. If you're in an organization, You'll avoid conflict. You'll either avoid it or you'll create a lot of it. Okay, because it doesn't matter that much. It's just an organization. Versus family, conflict has to be resolved. Conflict has to be reconciled. So you see all these practical outworkings of why family matters. Seeing the church as family and then taking it all the way down to our small groups and seeing those as little families, part of the larger family. But even like, I mean, yeah, so many practical outworkings then. Like even coming to church, say on a Sunday morning, are we just coming to consume a product offered by the organization? Be honest. Be honest. A lot of Christians think like that and make decisions like that. Going to participate, experience, consume a product and experience being organized by the organization. Not, we're tired, man. We've had a long, tiring week. We've had a hard week. We need to be with the family. We need to be with the family this morning. We need the encouragement of the family this morning. Or you've had a great week. And it's like, man, we want to be with the family and celebrate and, talk about what God has done this week. And we've got a lot to give this week to the family. Very different. Very different. So even as I say those things, let's keep going with this a little bit. Just give me some feedback about yours. Could either be your specific church or churches in your city, but assess for me this identity of family. I would give me some comments. And they could be positive comments too, by the way. It doesn't all have to be it doesn't all have to be critique. Okay, there's probably plenty of that, but
I'll
it
go.
could be
I'm quite happy.
positive to say, man, I love to see how our church is growing as family, and it looks like this.
Yeah, we've worked quite hard. So my context, Todd, was I moved from one of the sort of larger commission churches to we adopted a church into the family that was an ex-brethren church, and so very much a clash of cultures and the outworking of just the Christian life in many ways,
Yeah.
and I would say they used the word family, but it was family by definition of acceptance of Jesus as opposed to living as a
Yes.
family.
Yes.
And I've been here 7 years now, and we worked very hard at changing the culture where relationships are important. So even reading all your notes on groups and stuff like this, any of their midweek stuff was a Bible study where it's based more around whether you knew what was happening in any given context as opposed to how do you live that out in life. And so therefore the family dynamics were very different. It was
Yep.
more based around what you knew rather than how you live it. And so
Yep.
people could quote to me all the verses on grace in the Bible, but be some of the most, well, least gracious people in the world. And
Yep.
uh, and so it was an interesting context for me, this learning to be family and what it is. And so now I would say, just like you've been taught, our church is now messier,
Good.
which I'm pleased
Good.
about. Whereas it was a very, and I still think this is the case in a lot of our churches, middle class church. Whereas now we're getting more people from a not such a middle class background because we're seen as a place where it's okay to be messy. Um, and uh, and so yeah, so for me, it's been really I've loved watching the journey of our church that we've been on and taking it and so this is why I'm kind of here because I'm like
Good.
I
Super.
want to get more into that family, much more relational stuff. Like the amount of people who said to me in the past, "Oh, I can't disciple someone I don't know enough." I'm like, you're looking at discipleship so wrong. It's not about how much you know; it's about who you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so we've been on that journey. And so for us, it's yeah, we're not through it completely, but it's on a good trajectory at the moment that I'm really excited by.
That's great. That's great. Great way to talk about it too, Adam. And one thing you said I wanted to comment on is again, it's easy to throw ideas around in a church or to talk a lot about family and not really live like family or talk about mission. I see this a lot, churches that talk about mission and they're not really on mission, or mission is defined very narrowly often. But with this family, one of the things I would encourage you to do is it sounds like just the ongoing need to define it for your people, like very specifically. Like, hey, everybody, we talk a lot about family. What does that look like in daily, weekly, monthly life together? What's family? Let's be specific. How should that affect how we communicate? How should that affect the frequency of time we spend together? If we're just together for 2 hours a week, is that good family? So let's talk in the details about how we think family can and should be worked out in our context, how we're going to communicate, how we're going to resolve conflict, how we're going to spend time together, where we're going to spend time together. Interesting. I think we probably talked about this on the first call, but we will consistently be talking about the role of the table and being around the table together. There's nothing more, I'm not sure there's anything more familial or that describes a family than being at the table together. Okay. Meals, all forms of meals. Okay. That's what families do, right? Families eat together. Well, what else do families do? Families play together. I talked to so many churches and their people never play together, recreate together. It's like, what do you mean recreate? No, we just do meetings and, you know, we do a lot of meetings. They're good meetings, but they're meetings. Like when do you play? Like that's what so families eat together, they play together, they work together sometimes. Somebody's got a need, somebody's got a project, something in the garden, something on the house, the car needs fixed somehow. Okay, they're helping each other, they're working together. So eating and playing and celebrating. This makes me sad. I hear so many churches. It's like, what does celebration look like? And I'm not talking about like big church wide, you know, events again, but what does celebration look like in daily, weekly, monthly rhythm? You know, are you family? Are you celebrating birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and milestones in people's journeys? Are you celebrating as a small group? And then sometimes, yeah, are you celebrating as a larger church family? So anyway, help your people, and you're going to need if you're going to establish family as a culture in your churches, you're going to have to talk about these things often, talk about them consistently. Can't say, yeah, we did that teaching series last year on family like 12 months ago. If the last time you talked about it was 12 months ago, it's long gone in people's minds. Okay. It's something you've got to be remembering and reminding and rehearsing um, consistently. So that's some of the preaching and teaching I believe we're called to do. Um, again, is this reminding and encouraging and challenging in our identity. So,
Todd, I think
any other thoughts?
when you talk about family, I think we talk about family a lot more now in Grace Church, and as a result, it's become more messy, and and a more diverse group of people are able to connect now, which is causes more messiness, and because different backgrounds, different experiences, and then because of that messiness, perceived messiness, you have to then talk about it family more because you're explaining all the time what's going on.
Good.
Uh, so that would be my experience is you have a vision of what you'd like to become, you start becoming like it, and you have to, if you say don't talk about it for 12 months, something's not joined up because if you don't describe it, new people or people connecting in just
Exactly.
what is this? This is like people would use the word chaotic sometimes about gatherings and all of that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Like, well, that's family. Like family life isn't always tied up. Um,
Yep.
so I think that we found that that circle of what's happening in some ways forces you in the right sense to keep it right in the forefront of people's mind of family, not just acquaintances, not just community, even in
Yep.
that respect. So yeah,
Good. 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 Well said. Yeah, you've always got people, you've always got could be a few, but you've always got people coming in from somewhere, moving in or and they probably unfortunately came from church traditions or church experiences where again there wasn't a lot of this family dynamic in their churches, and so that's why you've got to consistently talk about it. But it's not just the talking about it. Obviously the most important thing is the modeling. So it's got to be modeled. It's got to be modeled on a Sunday morning when people come into your larger church gathering. Do they Yeah, is there a sense of family in what you talk about, in how you talk about it, even in some of the scheduled moments of your Sunday gatherings? So we do a simple thing as an example that I like. We start with worship, like many churches do. Okay, first 15 minutes, we give a few announcements right after those 15 minutes of worship, but then we take a 5 minute break right away at the beginning. 5 minute break for people to move around the room, move around the space, and catch up with the family, meet the family, talk with the family. So it's built in every Sunday, that 5 minute moment. And what's cool is when you begin to create this culture that's like family, when people connect, this has happened with me so many times. I will meet somebody new sometimes during that 5 minutes. Then we'll get on with the preaching and teaching that we do, and the communion that we take, and the prayer that we do. So we experience all that. But then afterwards, because of the 5 minutes towards the beginning, I will continue a conversation afterwards. And I see people continuing conversations afterwards, after the service, that began or happened during that first 5 minutes. Does that make sense? So simple little schedule choice our church is making to be a little more like family, creating space for people to relate and talk like that. So okay, we can come
Can
back to any of this. Sorry, somebody in.
I was just going to add, Todd, that I like a couple of things that you're saying about the intentionality that we need to have around creating family or family rhythms. And um, because basically, I think obviously we're trying to change, we talk a lot about it in church and we're trying to create a culture where that can happen. But we're also fighting against the actual culture
Yep.
outside of the church,
Yep.
where family is completely broken down and people just don't know how to function as a normal family anymore. So we are having to intentionally create that kind of those kind of dynamics, teaching people and showing people, demonstrating to people
Good.
what family should look like.
Yeah. Well said. Great point. Yeah, many times I talk with churches, and as we're talking about this idea of discipleship, I will basically name it reparenting. And I have to say, we have to be honest, in our culture, so many people have not been parented well. Even if their parents did not separate or divorce, they did not experience certain healthy patterns and ways of communicating and relating as a family. And so I honestly think so much of the discipling that we do need to do is reparenting in different forms. So, an example of that, again, I've already talked about food and being around the table. So, we've got what we call our family meal nights built into the rhythm of our missional community 2 times in a month. Okay. Family meal nights, Sunday night, 5 to 8 p.m. Family meal nights. Well, is that just a name, family? You just trying to have a cool name for this Sunday meeting you do? No, we're really trying to, again, model and help people experience family. So I love our family meal nights. Are they chaotic sometimes? Absolutely. We had 28 people recently, 13 adults, 15 children. How do you think that how do you think that felt? 28 people in a normal, not a large home, in a normal home. It was pretty chaotic, but beautiful. So beautiful. One of the people that was there was a non-Christian single mom with her 15-year-old son. You talk about reparenting. Think about her eating habits or what mealtime is like for her on a regular basis. Who's at her table regularly? Probably nobody. How about for her 15-year-old son? Who does he get to eat meals with regularly? Just his mom. So you imagine the single mom and her 15-year-old son coming into this moment, into this environment, with all these people sitting around the table, enjoying each other, enjoying the meal, talking about life. Wow, what a beautiful example of reparenting for them. Showing this 15-year-old boy like this is what a healthy family, this is how a healthy family lives and communicates and eats, and even with the sharing, even with the sharing of the responsibility for the meal, because we have everybody share responsibility and help prepare it and help clean it up and help do all that. Is this 15-year-old boy seeing that anywhere ever in his life? Probably not, or not much. Even as single mom, maybe she did in the past, way back, but it's been years since she's, been in the middle of something like this. So they love this single mom and her 15-year-old son love our family meal nights. Love our family meal nights for everything that happens there. The relational stuff, um, but just the dynamic of being in a home, being around the table, sharing, loving, blessing, being honest and genuine. So it's not just about the eating. We spend half of the time eating and enjoying each other, catching up, but then we spend half of the time talking about more significant things, life things, how to make Jesus central to family and central to work and central to all of life. So, okay.
Can I just say, Todd, I know you want to move on. Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
And not for you to answer now, but it might be something that as you unpack things, you might have some sort of ideas. But we're a church of about 40 people. Most of us are 60 plus. We only have one family really at the moment. And in the sort of context, I mean, we're a town of about 50,000 on the south coast. So it tends to be a place that people retire. We don't have a university, so our 18-year-olds tend to leave when they go to 18, go to university, and oftentimes don't come back. So there's kind of, various demographic things going on as well. And I don't know if this is peculiar a UK problem of churches that, are getting particularly older congregations, or whether it's something that you experience also in the US. But in terms of that outreach to a wider range of ages, obviously it's difficult when most of us are in our 60s and 70s. How do you reach those who might be in their 20s and 30s? And as I say, I don't necessarily want you to address that now because I know you want to move on, but it might be that as you go through the sessions, there might be things that you can pick up on and come up. If you've got any helpful ideas, then that would be
Yeah.
appreciated.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll get to some of that towards the end. Mick, connected with that one tool that I sent you. But again, whether they're 20 or 40 or 60, however old they are, I think we need to pray and look at our context and say, how do we intentionalize relationship? God's put us in the midst of the people he wants us to reach. We don't have to go far. It doesn't cost money. He's put us, that's why you're there, Mick. That's why you're in that place on the coast. You're in that place to reach and influence, proclaim Jesus to that population he's put you in the midst of. You don't have to go far. They're already there. Okay. So the question becomes, okay, if they're there, if the harvest is there, if the good soil is there, how do we find it? And then how do we engage it? How do we intentionalize relationship with some of these people? Again, based on our capacity. You got a church of 40, so you've got a certain capacity to do this, right? So based on your capacity and your circumstances and your context, you're saying, how do we intentionalize relationship with some of these people? No matter what ethnicity or what age or what economic standing, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It's the consistent, it's the consistency and the intentionalizing of relationship with people and saying how do we do that in our context. So I'm going to get to some of that towards the end. So I'll circle back around, Mick. Great question. Let me say one more thing about the family. I can't this is really important. I'm glad we spent this time on this. One of the strongest apologetics for the gospel is a church living like a family. One of the strongest apologetics for the gospel is a church living this way. Because again, there's so many, again, not surprising, there's so many God intended realities to living like a family. Again, the sacrifice required, the commitment required, the love and the servanthood, and just all of that is family, that describes family, right? So the more your churches grow in this, the more your small groups grow in this, the stronger the apologetic is. They will know we are Christians by how they see us love each other and sacrifice for each other and celebrate together and eat meals together and. But that statement, they will know by how I think you could easily and accurately substitute by how we live as family, by how we love each other, how we live daily life together, okay, as family. Okay, sent you 3 different documents, tools to look at. I don't know if you had time before the call. Please go back. If you didn't, please go back to those. I wouldn't send you anything that I don't think is important to consider. Okay, I'm not trying to make you busy or waste your time. But the first one, well, I wanted to comment on one of them was that DNA introduction. We talked about that quite a bit, I think, on the first call. Again, that's an aspect of family. DNAing together, being in those kinds of deep, vulnerable, genuine, accountable relationships with two or three others. It's just an expression of family. Okay. And I actually would have had a few other conversations about that this past couple of weeks. And again, often I will tell churches if we don't have a structure like that or a commitment like that, this DNAing in our churches, be honest, where else is that going to happen? Where else is that going to happen? It's not going to happen on a Sunday morning. It's impossible there. It's too big. It's too busy. It's too that type of DNA work and transformation that happens there. That can't happen on a Sunday. That can't even happen in a normal small group. It's still too big. It still has men and women present. So the unique reality of a smaller relational experience with three or four that are just women, that are just men, there is a lot that happens there that cannot happen, will not happen anywhere else. So please give some thought to that, do some work on that. We can circle back around to the DNA idea too. But you've got to take on some form of that in your churches.
Can I just, Mark,
Uh,
Todd, can I just ask a quick question?
yeah.
You might have covered it last time. I said I did watch the recording, but you have to excuse my memory. Um, have you found women are much better at this than men? Because they naturally get together
Yeah.
and talk about things on a deeper level. I
Yep.
watched, like the other day, I had a group of three ladies got together to bake cakes. Now, you might think that's really stereotypical, blah, blah, but they end up having the most deep discussion. I
Yep.
guarantee if men got together, that wouldn't happen. We wouldn't bake cakes for one. Um, but two, it wouldn't get to that level. Have you found it's harder to get the men DNAing rather than the women from your experience?
Um, Generally women do it better. I mean, we all know just in terms of communication style and uh I'll say it's more natural, but even for that reason is why we need to push hard to get men DNAing together. Again, you want to talk about broken family and the need for reparenting. Most men, and I've talked with a lot of men over the years, most men didn't grow up in a situation with their dads or in their families where there was healthy communication. Very, very small percentage. Very small percentage. So the need for reparenting for men to get men again communicating in deeper, genuine, vulnerable, accountable ways is just so critical. Just so critical because men didn't get it from their dads. I didn't get it. Thankfully, God brought it into my life from some other directions, some other influences. I didn't get it from my dad. I didn't get it from my brothers. I've got three older brothers. My dad wasn't a Christian. My brothers were Christians, but it still didn't matter because similarly, my brothers didn't get it from my dad. So my brothers didn't know how to relate in deep, genuine, vulnerable, accountable ways. So I grew up in a household where I didn't get it. And that is true for a large, large percentage of men in the world, all around the world. Okay. So critical as part of the discipleship and reparenting that's just consistent in our churches is that men are DNA. And then again, even though women are better at it generally, it still doesn't guarantee. I mean, to be honest, my wife's been in lots of different DNA relationships. Most of those women similarly didn't have, even if their parents were not divorced, their parents didn't communicate well. Their parents didn't communicate well with each other. And then the parents kind of communicated in very superficial ways with the kids. So even with these women, they don't, they've never, they were never parented well in terms of healthy relationship, healthy communication, all of these things. So it's just absolutely critical that you establish some form of DNAing in your churches. So we'd probably spend a whole session. We'd probably spend a whole session on that and what that
Yeah.
looks like and how to communicate and all that. But the document that I sent you is a good start. Lots of good lots of good perspective and lots of good details there. So I'd say get into that thoroughly, and then we could come back even on the next call and clarify some of those things. Okay, so
Yeah.
DNA document. Next document was the spirit dependence. Again, probably a whole session here if we wanted to, but um, yeah, working with lots of different churches from different theological perspectives in all of this, even with the churches that are more open, are more spirit sensitive, and um, I've found that often Christians kind of compartmentalize the spirit. The spirit exists for certain types of things in certain types of moments. It's almost like a prescribed. It's almost like a prescribed Holy Spirit experience. So that's another whole conversation. But what I feel like we really need to disciple our people into is this rhythmic daily dependence, prayerful dependence for the daily details of life. Like helping our people pray on their way to work in the morning. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Let's pray. Well, people are gonna, how should I pray? How should I pray on my way to work every morning? Well, pray and ask the Spirit to lead you, to show you which coworkers or what opportunity you need to take with your boss, who you need to eat lunch with, who you need to go out with, after work. But this prayerful dependence, asking the Spirit to lead, to help. That is part of that's part of the identity of the Holy Spirit, right? And that's what really prompted me to create that tool some years ago. I was like, there's a whole lot of very practical biblical detail about the Spirit that many Christians don't know or don't understand. But one of the names of the Holy Spirit is, right, the helper. I love it. The helper. Help with what? Okay. Just help on Sunday mornings with the gas service so we can have a spirit filled service. Well, yeah, maybe that's part of it. But don't you think the helping from the helper is meant to be more than that? Of course, much more than that, all the time. So if you looked at that document very closely, I highlighted some of Paul's teaching about the Spirit and what is the biggest idea or theme from Paul is this daily, consistent, rhythmic relationship dependence upon the Spirit. Paul talked about walking with the Spirit, keeping in step with the Spirit, letting your mind be filled with the Spirit. All these consistent, rhythmic, in step with types of relating. So this prayerful dependence, as people are going to work or going to school or walking their dog in the neighborhood. Asking the Spirit to lead them, to help them to see what neighbors should they connect with, help them to see what neighbors are struggling, help them to know how to carry on that conversation. You hear this all the time, right? Yeah, we spend time with our neighbors, but I never know how to talk with them about spiritual things. Have you ever heard that? Maybe 10,000 times. Don't know how to talk with my coworkers. I don't know what to say. I don't know what question to ask. I don't know. I don't know. You don't need to know. You do need help from the Spirit, but you don't need, what you most need is help from the Spirit in the moment to know what to say, to know what to ask, to know how to listen. That's what the helper is meant to help with. The details, daily details. And connected to what we were saying previously, both in terms of family. So even that you're asking the question, how can we cultivate a stronger family dynamic in our groups and in our church? Prayerfully ask the Spirit to lead you into the details. Holy Spirit, help us in the details, daily details. Help us, lead us, show us. So not only in terms of family, though, in terms of mission, there's nothing more clear in the New Testament description of the Spirit than he being a missionary spirit. So if your church is struggling in terms of mission, if your people are undermotivated in terms of mission, it is a spirit problem. It's partially an identity problem, as we mentioned earlier, but it's very much a spirit problem because the Spirit leads people on his mission. That's what he does. He's always doing it. So if our people are undermotivated, if our people are fearful of mission, if our people are lacking whatever in whatever way in terms of mission, we've got to help them get in stronger, more prayerful, more consistent dependence on the missionary spirit. Even many, many mornings when I wake up, the first thing I will think or pray is to ask the Spirit to lead me on his mission today. He's the missionary spirit. He's got an intended mission ready and waiting for me. But am I listening? Am I asking? Am I aware? See, that's the problem. Your churches are filled with people, if they're a Christ follower, they have that missionary spirit in them. Okay, hope we all believe that. Okay, if we don't, we better circle around on that another time. Okay, but they have this missionary spirit in them, which every day wants to send them and go with them on his mission, literally every day, because that's what he does. That's who he is. He is the missionary spirit. So if our people are not engaging in that way at work and school and in the neighborhood and in their daily life, then there's some disconnect, right? We have to assume there's some disconnect from that missionary spirit because he's always going to be consistent and true to who he is. So you see how important this is, guys?
I think that's a really important thing to clarify because I think we can assume people were saved with that mentality. And I just don't think that's true for 98% of the church where I'm at least, is they don't see themselves invited into the mission of God. They see themselves as saved. And I think one of Satan's best tricks is that if I'm saved, that's the epitome of what I've been taught to almost achieve in church, right? And so Satan would rather us think we're saved and not be a threat to anybody. But to have somebody invited into the mission of God is a completely different mindset. To say, you're not just a victim who's been, rescued and you need to go sit on the sidelines. We're going to give you a weapon to get back into the fight, and so you're like, your testimony has power, these basic things that probably all of us on this call think of,
Good.
because somebody invited us in. Nobody would be on this call unless somebody invited you into the mission of God.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. Well said. It's very undertaught, Adam, and very under-discipled. I think it's one of the when you think again, when you think of discipleship and what needs to happen in the maturing of a young believer to become a mature believer, this is one of the key things. If we were to list like, okay, what are the top 5 things that have to happen? This has to happen. This has to happen. Unfortunately, because it doesn't happen, because it's not a priority, because it doesn't get discipled well, that's why we see the lack that we do in so many churches. Like you said, Adam, 98%, I would agree with you. It's not an overstatement. I've found working with churches around the world, and again, even in more spirit-filled, spirit-sensitive churches, still a lack, because the Spirit is seen as someone that does these things often in the larger gathering or the larger meeting of the church, but not in daily life. I just don't hear it, see it much in daily life. So, and connected to your point, Adam, because it's not discipled into people, not only do they not see themselves and go, but they don't feel they've got the power or the that's the saddest thing. Like we've got this amazing power and influence, supernatural, the spirit who raised Jesus from the dead, that same spirit is with us to be our helper on the mission. Can we not go to work with confidence? If we have the spirit who raised Jesus from the dead, can we not go to work with confidence? Can we not go to school with confidence? Can we not live in our neighborhood with confidence? If the spirit who raised Jesus from the dead is our helper on his mission, because that's who he is. He's the missionary spirit, and he's got the mission there. But so many Christians are not even thinking, asking, listening to what the mission is, who the mission is, where the mission is. And if they do have a bit of a sense of it, they're often still kind of hesitant or fearful or lacking confidence because they think they've got to go do it alone.
Can I can I just add to that, Todd? I think in our
Please.
context and in our churches, I think this would be taught in most contexts. So I think most of the people in our churches would have an understanding, or if you'd ask them, have a conversation, they'd know it in theory, but then in
Assent to it.
but then in practice, aren't there's kind of a disconnect between what they know and what they're then kind of living out day to day. And I think that's partly because of, again, it comes back to us being able to demonstrate it in a practical way, living
Yeah.
life in a way as a church, doing life, organizing church in a way that this is not only taught, but they can see, okay, this is, and we create environments, if you like, for them to be able to put it into practice. And
Good.
that's maybe partly where we failed in the past.
Yeah.
With the overemphasis on the Sunday, and that's where people, although they hear that they've got the Spirit with them and that they can, they're being sent out with the Spirit's power. In practice, they only see it practiced on a Sunday
Yeah.
by a certain few normally.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yep.
So there's that. Yeah.
Good. Good. So it's another one of those things where the work we must do as leaders is to normalize and model what this looks like in the specifics. It gets back to mix what we were saying about family. Nobody has a problem with the term family, but they're not clear about specifically what are the implications of that. Again, what's that look like in terms of communication and consistency and commitment and all of that? Same here. Same here. We've got to be more practical, more specific to say, this is how we go to work with the help of the Spirit. let's let's talk about work. This is how we go to work day to day with the help of the Spirit. This is how we live in our neighborhood. Okay, we all live in different types of neighborhood. This is what it looks like practically, specifically to do that with the help of the Spirit. Okay, our kids' school or our kids' sports or the different activities we're involved in, any hobbies. This is how we do that. This is how we go into those relational spaces with the help of the Spirit. That's where I think we need to do a lot of work.
Todd, do you think we would say Commission New Frontiers charismatic churches, but how we've taught on the person of the Spirit has hindered or has amplified this sort of disconnect so massive generalization, but the Spirit's there to help us. He's like a power to call upon when we need him, rather than he is the person of God who is sent to be God with us now, who we walk through life with as if Jesus was walking with us next to each other. If we had that mindset that we are walking with the Spirit, living with the Spirit, rather than drawing on his power when we feel like it or when we're in need, surely that would reset our thinking in this, would be my contention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you answered your question. Perfect.
It probably wasn't a question, but probably helpful to
Yeah.
a statement of
Yeah, I
observation
love it.
with our kinds
I
of
love it.
churches, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it. I don't know how you guys, I don't know you well enough yet to know how you have taught historically in spirit things, but um, that's actually why I wanted us to, I could have avoided this or I could have left this little bit out, but I had the sense that, again, just because I've worked with so many denominations and networks, that even when they're more spirit sensitive, I've just found a real lack. Um, and where there's a lack in this area, there's obviously, it's one of the, I mean, how many Christians you talk about being tired? Everybody I talk to, we're tired. People in ministry, tired, discouraged. I think this is part of the reason. I'll just be honest. Do we get tired from living life? Obviously. Okay. I get tired, plenty tired. At the end of every day, I'm tired. Okay. It's a different kind of tiredness, though. It's a different kind of tiredness. And the tiredness I hear a lot of Christians and a lot of Christian leaders talk about is that different tiredness, which I think comes from a lack of tapping into this daily help from the helper. Because if it's his mission with his help, it should not be overly taxing. Okay. We get to the end of the day and it's a good tired. Okay. It's a proper tired. It's not the other, you guys know what I mean. It's not the other kind of tired. So that's why I wanted to throw this into our conversations. This session is just to say, let's work on this. And we've got to help more of our people live their daily lives like this. It has so many different practical implications. Okay. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to move us on. Again, great conversation. We can talk about it more later. Another document I sent you, the discipleship continuum. What in the world is that? Those circles, those arrows, like, what's that about? This has been helpful for a lot of churches in just helping clarify what the relational dynamics are, I think, in a healthy small group community, missional community. Okay. And seeing basically three categories of people. You've got your committed core, which you've got to, yeah, I don't know if we talked about any of this on our first call, but that committed core, I believe, is a minimum of four people. Why four? Okay. Well, unfortunately, part of that comes from seeing a lot of good leaders, a lot of good leader couples burn out because they were leading small groups, home groups, cell groups, missional communities, leading alone, one couple. And we thought, oh man, they're a superstar couple, very mature, very motivated, all of that doesn't matter. One couple, two humans do not have the capacity, the strength, they to carry the load of a proper community on mission. Okay. Minimum of four. Two couples, couple and two singles, four singles, doesn't matter. Four humans, four humans that love Jesus. Okay. But part of the reason, if you see in that visual, another reason is that committed core is going to need to grow if it's ever going to multiply. I work with a lot of churches that add small groups or add community groups, but those groups never multiply. Well, why don't they multiply? This is part of the reason why they don't multiply. Because the core at the center of the community never grows and matures to give them the ability to multiply and start a new family. Man, you want to talk about an awesome metaphor. Anybody who's got kids, or you guys have all experienced this, you were part of a family that got sent out from the family to start a new family, right? That's how things work. That's how families expand and multiply. It's the same reality. Why is this also important? So many churches I work with complain about not having enough leaders. Oh, we need more leaders, and we don't have enough leaders. And we would like to start two more groups, but we don't have leaders. And then I'll ask them, what are you doing? Like, what's your pipeline? What's your leadership pipeline? And there is no pipeline. They just hope if they teach enough somehow or have this cool leadership course or this leadership curriculum that leaders are just gonna appear somehow. Good teaching doesn't develop leaders. We do need some good teaching, don't hear that, but leadership development is primarily experiential. Where are they going to get the experience? By being part of a committed core of a community. That's your leadership pipeline. Okay. Is for the committed core at the center of each of your communities, that you're consistently inviting young Christians. Again, that was that middle category, the younger Christian, the baby Christian. As they're growing, they're getting invited into sharing responsibility as part of the community. And that's how they grow up. That's how they mature. That's how you gain the ability to mature, to multiply someday. Okay. So that committed core, that whole reality is so important. It's your leadership pipeline. It gives you the ability to multiply. That's how um, that's how the average Christian takes those next steps to maturity. If they don't get invited into sharing leadership at the center of a community, they will just be again, I use the term, they could be They could be an average Christian for the next 20 years, honestly. Saw it in the church I grew up in, unfortunately. Good people, good people, showing up every Sunday, but only that. Not being called into sharing responsibility for the leadership of a community, which is going to grow them and mature them in certain ways that just being part of the bigger meetings or the bigger things of the church will accomplish. Okay. So you've got that committed core. You see those circles on the right. You've got this group of young Christians, baby Christians in the middle. That's always going to be part of every one of your communities. Okay. So committed core, we'll say 4, 6, 7, 8 people. Those younger Christians around them, that's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 of those generally. And then you've got that big circle on the left. And I'm going to talk about that and then connect it to our last tool. Who are those people? Okay. That big circle on the left, those are the non-Christians. Those are the non-Christians that every community has prayerfully discerned. Hear that. It's not just some random group of people, the neighborhood, or on mission to our kids' school. It's not that. It's not just some general group of people, random group of people. It's a very specific group of non Christians that you have prayerfully discerned you are sent to. That's the last tool that I sent you. Many churches I work with talk about mission generally. Yeah, we're feel called to reach our city. Well, your city's massive. Okay. Even mix 50,000. You know what you said? 50,000 on the coast. It's big. You're a church of 40. Okay. God's not sending you to the whole city. Okay. He's got specific people he wants you to love and serve and influence within that 50,000. You've got to clarify again specifically who is the good soil? Who are the people he is sending you to amongst that 50,000? But see, so many churches I work with, when they talk about mission, think about mission, pray about mission, it's too big and it's too general. Trying to reach our neighborhood. Well, your neighborhood has like 200 people in it, 50 families, or, oh, we're trying to reach our kid's school. Well, your kid's school has 200 people in it. Okay. You can't love that many people well this year. You can't serve that many people this year. You can't influence that many people this year. What can you do? I believe from experience that the number is maybe 12 to 15. I hope that sounds like good news. Wow. You mean we could just focus on 12 to 15 this year as a community? And again, you're not closing yourself off to the rest of the world. It's all an issue of focus and intentionality. That's what that last tool, 5 Essentials for Effective Mission, is trying to help each of your small groups identify and clarify. Who are the 12 to 15? Specific names of specific people, not the neighborhood, not my workplace. There's 40 people at your workplace. Who amongst those 40? What 3 coworkers seem to be good soil? What 3 coworkers does God want you to pursue with the help of his spirit to become friends with, friends of sinners? I think that's the goal, guys. Friends of sinners. Okay. On our 3rd session, and in London, if you're there, we will talk about this more, but this idea, so many Christians have no shortage of relationships in most cases. But the problem is that most of those relationships are acquaintances. They're acquaintances, not trusted friends. If a non-Christian is interested in spiritual things, if a non-Christian has big struggles in their life, who are they going to go to with those questions? Who are they going to go to with those struggles? Are they going to go to their acquaintances? No, not usually. Who are they going to go to? Family or trusted friends. So if we don't become those trusted friends, we will not have spiritual opportunity with them to influence them. So part of our work in leading our churches and developing mature disciples is to help the Christians in your church. Again, the acquaintances are already there. It's built into life. Your neighbors in your neighborhood, families at your kids' school, co-workers, those are acquaintances. Okay. It's just life around us. Okay. But a big part of it is you helping your people move some of those relationships from the acquaintance stage to the friend stage. Okay. Jesus became a friend of sinners, not an acquaintance of sinners. He was a friend of sinners. Very important. If we don't become those friends of sinners, we will usually not have any spiritual opportunity with them. Okay. What do you guys think? Whether it's London or Dawlish or Porto or the different places you guys come from, give me some feedback about this idea.
Well, my wife and I, for one, we lived this out in the States and now we're serving here in Portugal. And I like what you said about the size of who you reach, because we did, we lived in a neighborhood, it's probably what, 100 homes, maybe 75 homes,
No idea.
somewhere in that range. And but we had like an inner circle and like an outer circle. So we were in the inner circle, and the relationships we built as our missional community reached out to that inner circle road was much deeper than those out on the outer circle. So the size mattered. It's not that we didn't invite them into, if we did something for the whole neighborhood, we would still invite the larger circle.
Sure.
Usually
Good.
the inner circle is the ones that, we're going to Luke's house, Luke and Shannon's house for the cookout that we do every year. And so having that mentality is good, because I'm always like, let's invite 1,000 people. But knowing that, this is what our missional community can handle, is this number of people, was really important. So yeah, and we saw that actually live out. So at least more intentionally with that inner circle than the outer.
Yep, very good. Very good. Yeah, there was one point some years ago our church realized, okay, we're eating meals and throwing parties, and we're doing a lot of that work with non-Christians. And we actually probably had some hundreds of non-Christian relationships, but they were in the acquaintance stage. Seeing them like once a month, once every 2 months, 3, 4, 5 times a year. It's just not enough, guys. You can go on for years like that with somebody and never make any deeper relational progress with them, because it's just not deep enough. It's just not consistent enough. There's just not enough trust to be able to go into deeper parts of someone's story, deeper into their life, to see and hear and feel where the brokenness or the pain or the questions about life are. And that's what we realized, was like, wow, we've built a lot of acquaintance stage relationships with non-Christians. around us, hundreds, but very few of them have gone deeper. And churches can function like that actually for years. You can just keep spinning. You can just keep spinning around all these acquaintance relationships. You can have hundreds of them. And 5 years later, it's like, has anything changed here? It's like, um, so yeah, I think you guys know from experience and you guys know intuitively that this is true. So that tool is to say, how do we help each of our groups clarify the mission? Who is the mission? And again, how do we do that? We do it prayerfully. We ask God to show us where is the good soil, who is the good soil. You guys remember the parable of the soils? We don't want to be planting seed amongst hard soil if we can avoid it. We don't want to be planting seed amongst the weeds if we can avoid it. We want to be planting in good soil. So prayerfully asking where's the good soil and then discussing it as a community. So that's again the value of family and as a community saying, hey, everybody, we've got these couple of coworkers and we're having these conversations at work and this is going on. What do you guys think? Are they part of our mission? Does that seem like good soil? Are you sensing, are you discerning from God that we want to commit to them together? Because that's what's going to need to happen after you identify the 12 to 15. Now you're saying this next 12 months, we're giving our best life to these people. That's why this matters. This next 12 months, we're giving our best life to these people. That means we're praying for them more consistently, praying for them more intentionally. It means anytime there's a party, we're watching the big game, those 12 to 15 are getting invited. So that should be good news to you. It helps you know who to invite most of the time. Okay. Luke said, again, some things, if we're doing a big holiday party or who knows, we might invite the expanded group of acquaintances, but for sure, the Christmas party and the birthday party and watching the big game and the next holiday party and the next meal night, those 12 to 15 are getting invited. And there will be many times when those 12 to 15 say, oh, I can't come. But you know what? I I I don't mind getting rejected or people say no. I don't mind. Because every time you make that invitation, it communicates that you cared. So don't feel bad about people saying no, or you invite them to a meal, you invite them to the party, you invite them to the game. It's okay if they say no. We had neighbors say no like 5 times in a row. It's like, are you going to keep inviting them? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we believe God has sent us to them, first of all. But secondly, we don't know the timing, and we believe it will come around because, again, God has sent us to them. But every time, even through a text, you invite them, hey, you watching the big game on Saturday? Just that text communicates you are thinking about them. That text communicates you care. That's important. Most people do not have a lot of people texting them. They don't have people thinking about them. They don't have people inviting them. Just assume that most people don't have that. So when you do it, when your groups do it, you're doing something that's communicating love, it's communicating thought, communicating care, communicating you want to be in a relationship, you want them at the party, you want to watch the game with them, you're desiring relationship with them. Does that make sense? But if you can help each of your groups lock into 12 or 15, man, even if you're a smaller church, let's just say you're a new church plant, you've got two small groups, three small groups. Okay. Imagine if those three small groups each have 12 to 15 praying for, inviting, loving well. Man, that's pretty exciting, right? Those small groups, do the math. You're talking about 36 to 45 lost people that are getting this intentional care, prayer, week in and week out, month in and month out. Man, as a church, I could feel good about that. That's if you just have three of those groups. If you're in a little bigger situation, you've got 5, 6, 7 of those groups. Again, do the math. Now you're talking, you've got 60, 70, 90, 100 lost people that are getting this intentional, consistent focus. Man, to me, that's pretty exciting. So you can get to the end of the year, and who knows how God's going to use it? That's always up to him. We plant, we water, he makes things grow. You can get to the end of the year and say, wow, look at these 60 people we loved and pursued, invited, ate meals with, were at parties with. We started to get invited to their parties because we became friends. But you get to the end of the year and you can look back and say, wow, we planted and watered to the best of our ability. We planted and watered. We're getting to the last minutes. Comments, observations.
Just a question, really. In your experience, Todd, what would be percentage, if you like, of people that you see coming through to faith of those 12 to 15? That'd be one of the questions. Just, I think, because sometimes we create unhelpful or unreasonable expectations as well. Because I know a lot of what God is doing is in us, and start with, is in the group that's being discipled, that is stepping out there, that's going on missions, listening to the Spirit. So all of that is going on. So that's that. But also, in terms of the people that these groups will be reaching out to, what has been the experience? Have you seen it being, if you compare it to normal way of doing church, for want of a better way of putting it, a higher success rate in terms of seeing non-Christians saved?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to redefine success first of all and say, to me, success or the goal from what we read scripturally is to become friends of sinners. So that's first of all how I'm going to define success, more than, again, we don't control conversion growth. And I've seen so many different variations of what that looks like depending on the context. I lived in the Czech Republic, lived in Romania, worked in a lot of different countries. So in terms of conversion growth, I don't know, generally I'll say 10%. I'll say 10%. But the bigger thing to your question, Andre, is, and we experienced this as a church, I told you this years previously, where we would get to the end of the year and say, we've got a whole lot of acquaintances. But is that the goal? Is just to know a lot of non-Christians like superficially? A little bit of relationship here, a little bit of relationship there. We ate one meal with them this year, and they came to one of our parties or one of our events the whole year. Well, then it's the same thing the next year. And you get churches that, again, they get people coming to this event or that event, but most of those relationships never progress very far. That's why I want to define success as deepening a relationship with lost people that can be defined as friendship,
Mm.
where there is a level of trust there, where there's the possibility of them coming to you to talk about their fracturing marriage or parenting issues or sexual issues or big life questions, where we've built enough trust with people that we are one of those people in their life that they will go to in those moments with those
Mm.
questions. I think that's how because again, Jesus, you know,
Yeah.
Jesus had a lot of people come to him and a lot of people go away from him. If you want to talk about percentages,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. I'm,
He had thousands come near, right? He had thousands come near. How many stayed near? Okay, I have to say it's a few percent if you want to talk percentages. So, but anyway, our calling in it, I believe, friends of sinners, plant and water. But I believe if we can bring this, if we can help each of our small groups lock into a smaller number, really focus, love them well. That's why I said we're giving our best life to them. Okay. That means we're just very consistently thoughtful about them. How we're inviting them, texting them, just all the little relational moments throughout a week, throughout a month, all those different relational moments. That group of people is getting your best effort.
mm.
And again, Luke said it kind of in his story, but that doesn't mean we're closed off to a broader community. Still got because sometimes people will pop in or pop out of that focus. We had a situation where we invested deeply, deeply in this non-Christian couple. She was the assistant city manager in our city. She was a high public official. Um, but we had incredible spiritual conversations with them. They were very anti-Christian when we first met them, but we saw them soften. We saw them warm up. We had great conversation with them. They would consider us some of their closest friends in the city. And then she got transferred completely across the country. And America is a big country. Okay. So she got transferred from Seattle to North Carolina, about as far as you can be. And it's like, what just happened there? Why did that happen? What, you know? But again, that's where we're part of people's journeys, and we don't know how God's going to use it then or in the future, but that's not up to us. You got to help your people understand that. We plant, we water, we plant, we water, we plant, we water, we plant, we water. My grandfather, my grandfather became a Christian when he was 83 years old. Crazy story, crazy journey. People could have said, "Oh, man, we tried for a couple years. Let's move on. Let's go plant and water somewhere else." But there were some faithful people prayed for him literally for 50 years. And in God's timing, when he was 83, he was radically transformed. He was the mean, angry, not nice grandpa when I was younger. Didn't love his wife, didn't love his kids, didn't love his grandkids. Kind of a nasty old man. And then became a transformed at 83. Totally different. Towards his wife, towards his kids, towards us grandkids. So we water faithfully, consistently, intentionally. We plant, we water. But see, if you don't have this kind of focus, again, you want to use the metaphor, you're kind of planting or watering in this huge area. Well, what happens then? It just all dies off. Because you can't give that big field the attention that it needs. So it gets watered this week, but doesn't get watered again until next month. Well, what happened in the meantime? The seed dried up, didn't germinate, didn't start to grow in any way, died off, didn't get watered. Got watered last month, didn't get watered again for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, didn't get watered again, shriveled up, dried up, died. Such a good relational metaphor.
Todd, can I ask, just to clarify, in your context, I think getting a list of 12 to 15 people, is that done by an individual, by a small group, or by a DNA group?
By the small group together. They do it together as a family. Who are we committing to this year as a family?
Right.
Individuals are going to bring certain relationships into that, obviously. So it could be Mick, it could be 2 or 3 of your neighbors, but then it could be 2 or 3 of Rob's coworkers, and it could be 2 or 3 families from Dave's kids' school. So they're coming from different pools of relationship. So you might be, well, how do those people get to know each other? That's the cool thing about living life like this. Meals and parties, and they will get to know each other very quickly, actually. And they will also, even though they didn't start out as friends, as a friend group, they will actually quickly become friends with each other because of the consistency and the intentionality of the relationship. So the single mom I told you about with the 15-year-old son, she came into our community. She became part of our mission because of my wife and I in our kids' school. That's where we met her, kids' school. Okay. Invited her to a meal, built a little trust. Now she was open to coming to the next thing. So she came to an individual meal at the beginning, just with my wife and I, getting to know her, building trust. But then a month later, she came into our family meal night with our whole community. Well, our whole community loved her well. And very quickly, she became close friends with a number of them, just like she was with us. She loved it. Does that make sense? So think of a normal small group. Could be 1 or 2 relationships from this person or this family, and then 1 or 2 or 3 from here, and then 2 or 3 from there, and then together you're saying, let's work together to love each other's friends well. I don't know if I told you this on the first call. Did I tell you this 5.3 statistic? You've probably heard it, Dave. No, 5.3. Very important. Okay. The average non-Christian will need to become friends with 5.3 Christians in their journey to Jesus. Isn't that interesting? There was some research done about it, but I've talked about it around the world for the last many years, and anecdotally, I know it to be true. Cross cultures. The average non-Christian, so your non-Christian neighbor, your non-Christian coworker, that non-Christian, they cannot just be loved by you. All of you guys are amazing, but you're not enough. The non-Christian neighbors you have, coworkers you have, are going to need to be loved by a community of people, at least 5.3. And that's because of different stories and different giftings and different, the different influences that are brought by a community, young and old, rich and poor, more educated, less educated. It's all of that working together. It's all of that diversity working together, men and women, young and old. 5.3. So we have to say, how do we organize our lives in such a way? How do we organize our small groups in such a way to bring that 5.3 influence upon the life of a lost person? You're not enough. You and your wife are not enough. You and your wife and your best friend are not enough. Okay? You're part of it. You're an important part of it, critical part of it, still not enough. The single mom has been loved, and she is, we're not totally sure, but we think she is we'd probably say she's a Christ follower now. Did my wife and I play a part in that? Absolutely. But our whole community has loved her well over the last few years. She's been influenced by more than 5.3. She's been influenced by, I don't even know now, probably 12, 13, 14 different Christians that have built trust with her, loved her well, served her at times, eaten meals, celebrated at parties, gotten to know her story, answered her questions. 5.3. So, hey, such good discussion, I think. hopefully,
Rob,
hopefully this is hopefully
did
this
Rob
is
have a
answering some
question?
of your questions and clarifying some things. And again, we're on a journey together.
Yeah,
And
I wondered, Todd, it's fascinating as always to listen. I'm in Torquay at Together Church, and we've planted a church of well, about 40 people or so currently, and we've known from the beginning it's going to look very different because of the type of chaotic community that we're in. I wondered, just thinking forward to maybe the next session, whether you could speak into like what it looks like to go from the kind of conventional models that we're used to within our organization to then thinking about some of the approaches that you're talking about. We're kind of we've kind of put an end to our current group structures, ready to relaunch in the spring. So we're just kind of playing out the rest of the term to then relaunch. So I think from our perspective down here, we'd find it really useful to say how do you actually start to pull together the DNA groups, the missional communities, and what does that look like?
Okay, good. So I'm going to give you a bit of homework, which is going to help towards this, Rob. But I sent you those documents, but I also sent you a link to some short 2-minute videos. They're 2 minutes long, so you can roll through those things really quickly. Okay. Many of the things we've talked about here are going to be highlighted there in different ways. Okay. They're very simple, clear, practical. Please watch those before we meet again. Again, you can watch all of them literally in under 30 minutes. So I have to say there's no excuse. Okay. So under 30 minutes, There's 12 of them, 2 minutes long. Do the math, 24 minutes of your time. They will be helpful. But then before we meet again, I would love for you to send a list of clear questions to give us a little bit more direction so we make sure we're hitting on the proper things. Okay. So I'd love for you to send some questions. You could send them through, you could send them to Dave. Dave could collect them in, however you want to do it. But yeah, be great to have a list of very clear, specific questions. One of those videos, by the way, Rob talks about transitioning traditional groups to missional groups or missional communities. And again, there's just a few simple, clear thoughts that I can unpack a little bit more next time we talk. But part of the purpose of those videos is to give leaders like you talking points with your people. So you might be like, it's only 2 minutes. Okay. The idea is to set up the ideas so that you can then work it out with your people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the real value of those, is not just for you to,
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
not just for you to watch them, but for you to say, hey, I'm gonna queue up that 2 minute or two of those with my small group, and then we're gonna say, okay, how do we work this out as a small community? That's where the real value is. So, okay.
Great. Todd,
Yep.
thank you again for your Adam.
Just Andre, you had a point about the salvation piece, and I think this would be helpful for everybody to hear. The leadership development piece of that 12 to 15 is so crucial, and living on mission and community is so crucial. So when we sent people to the 1040 window as missionaries from the States, we made them live in a group like this for a minimum of 1 year. And the success rate that I think you'll all find very interesting is the missionaries that lasted past 5 years on the mission field. The difference of people who just went and joined an organization and weren't part of a team or a real community, and then they just appeared on a mission field. The biggest difference was the health of their marriage and the longevity that they stayed on the field. And so for people that lived in this kind of community, and we said walking distance, which in the States is really hard to do, so it took sacrifice. But if they lived within walking distance for the year, even with people they weren't with long term, but they lived in a community that was intentional, trying to reach people in this way we're talking about, they would last past 5 years on the mission field 78% of the time. And if they didn't, it was 32% of the time.
Wow.
And that was from one of the healthiest sending organizations, Launch Global, in the States. And so that massive jump, almost all of it had to do with understanding how to live on mission in your own context before you moved to a different culture than your own. So Laura and I actually lived in for about 6 years in different groups like this. We'd take a group for a year, take another group for a year, take another group. And so that helped us tremendously when we moved here. And church plant is, well, we've done this before. And because it was, hey, how do we live intentionally? And then we move again. So our problem is we need to stay beyond that amount of time. But the 5 year thing of, whoa, their marriages were healthier. I think the Kamaras are agreeing with me here. You just see a lot more longevity. And then what the fruit of that is, when you have people stay faithful, their ministry is always going to be more fruitful. And their marriages are healthier. They're always going to last longer, and they're going to reach more of their neighbors, kids, friends, and all that. It just goes on and on. So I think the longevity piece just can't be understated. And if you live like this, you will see fruit like this. I know Shagan's face isn't on the call, but he's got a really special relationship with his son. And it's really cool to see the fruit that's coming from that, where now their church has 25, 30 young adults because of the longevity piece. So I would just encourage everybody. You might not see, when you hear salvation only being 10%, but the multiplication is just massive for it. So really your best leadership development model is helping people know how to be faithful and depend on the Spirit like this in a group setting. So just want to add that to what Todd
Awesome.
was saying.
Yeah.
Love it.
The comment or the question really, because I'm 100% behind everything that you shared, and that's that's the shift that we've tried to make in terms of how we measure success, everything that you already said. But we just find that in terms of motivating church members, that we're trying to encourage in this culture shift, that that you want to obviously fill them with faith that God will, use them to see their friends saved, but at the same time, helping them not to beat themselves up too much when it doesn't happen, when they don't see it. Keep them encouraged. Sure. So the whole thing of realizing that the main thing is being faithful, obedient, all the good stuff that you've already said.
Yeah.
And then the fruit side of things. So it's just for me an interesting and quite helpful to know that actually in terms of salvation, it may happen, it may not.
Yep.
That's not the main indicator of success, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. When I was living in Romania, I remember one of the conversations I had consistently with the Romanian leaders we were working with was also this idea that pursuing and loving and intentionalizing relationship in this way, becoming friends of sinners, I believe is such an act of worship. And just that is worth the effort. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows when and where and how other fruit is going to look like? But us living like this, living with this kind of focus and intentionality to love others, again, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors as yourself. 2 greatest commandments. Built into that, baked into that, is this reality that it's such a worshipful reality. He is worthy of us living this way. When we choose to live in this way, sacrifice to live in this way, organize to live in this way, it is such a profound act of worship. And that's enough. That's enough for me. That's enough to motivate me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So anyway, might be something you want to encourage your people with is to remind them connected to this worship reality.
Yeah.
And to say, when we go together, pursue love well. Wow. What a beautiful act of worship for him that's worthy of that worship. So can I pray for us?
Yeah.
Father, thanks for my brothers and sisters and their love for you and desire to worship you in this way. And I pray that just pray for encouragement in the days ahead. And pray that you would lead them to just next steps as they think about their churches. And I think about the small groups that they're part of, just lead them to just healthy next steps. So we need your constant help and leading and encouragement and reminding, and we humbly ask for that right now. And I pray for the hearts of their people. We know how just all of this has to come from a place of the heart. It's not some magic strategy or magic structure, but it's heart motivated living. And so I pray for the hearts of their people.
Yeah.
Just that you would grow their hearts convict their hearts, encourage their hearts, mature their hearts, but do some very powerful work in the hearts of their people so that they would, just see an increasing desire um, to love others well in their cities. So, Father, thanks for loving us well again today. Thanks that we are your sons and daughters. We love you and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.